I think it's a real challenge that so often we can get caught up in being in awe of the music at the concert. We can be so in awe of God's creation or the things that we create or that others create. Yet what is most interesting and most wonderful to me is the chance to meet Jesus face to face, to be in that experience of relationship with him now and forevermore. My name's James. I'm Sarah's husband. We've got our two daughters, Emma and Izzy, and we love being a part of Seeds. And I'm continuously thankful that I get to follow Jesus every day. I'm stepping into my 17th year in schools ministry and leading in schools. And I'm just thankful for that each and every day. Yes, we're looking at Acts 17 this morning. And we're going to consider the idea of being the best version of yourself. I'm not sure if you've heard this phrase before. Maybe you've even thought about it for yourself. How can I be the best version of yourself? And I want you to consider, to start off with, what's the thing that you're really good at? What's that number one skill that you might have been practicing for a long time or a shorter amount of time, but it's the thing that you're really good at? Talk to the person next to you, share, what's your number one talent or skill? Go. All right, very good. I wonder, does anyone think that you're a master at something? Does anyone think that you are essentially one of the best in the world at something? I'm not sure. I'd be interested to know after. There's this idea that you might have heard of the 10,000 hour rule, where you need to put something into practice or repeat something for 10,000 hours in your life, and then you might actually have the chance of achieving mastery. So I'm not sure if there's any golfers in the room where you've had sort of 10,000 hours out on the green. Or maybe there's some knitters in the audience, all right? Maybe we're really good at creating garments, all right? Maybe you've got a skill in gardening. Maybe you're a good dart player or thrower, I'm not sure. But this idea of 10,000 hours to achieve mastery. Well, I've got a couple of hobbies, just a couple, but mountain biking is one of those, and I've been riding bikes keenly since I was 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. And I love mountain bike riding around Adelaide and travelling out and doing long rides, short rides, whatever I can get on the bike, I'm pretty happy. And I've entered a few races in my time. And I'm not sure if this is the sort of physique that you imagine for a pro cyclist. But I'm 34, so I've had 30 years on the bike, and I'm proudly say that in the handful of races that I've entered into, I've come dead last or did not finish in all of them. It's either been too hot, or it's just been too hard, or I'm just way too slow. And so no matter, I don't think, how much training I put in, I'm not sure if I have the best coaching in the world, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be a professional cyclist, particularly a mountain bike rider with my 100-kilo frame. No matter how hard I try, I will never be the best. Probably not even very good. And I think that for me, this has been quite a confronting challenge for probably most of the areas of my life. Can you think of anyone that has said this idea, that I'm just trying to be the best version of myself? Sort of put your best foot forward, to be successful. And we've generally come under the guise that if we just keep working at it, if you just put foot after foot, if we just keep practicing, if you just keep persevering, that you will be successful, that under your own strength, under your own ability, eventually you'll be successful. Sarah and I have been watching, well, probably Sarah more so, and I've been kind of dipping in and out of the Martha Stewart documentary that's been going on Netflix. Anyone watched that before? If you haven't watched it, I'm sure you know who Martha Stewart is. And she's probably one of the original influencers as far as all of her magazines and all of her ideas piercing the hearts of many, many people across the world for a long time. She sort of, for me, is almost the epitome of creating the best home and the best lifestyle and the best appearance and putting everything that you can do in place to make yourself look and seem amazing. that under her own strength, she's been able to create the most amazing recipes and the most amazing bedspreads and outfits. That Martha Stewart has led this idea of being able to do it in your own strength, to be able to just be a little bit more creative, just be a little bit more disciplined, find that bit more time to work on that project, just get your garden just a little bit nicer. She's had this idea that if you just keep working at it, you can achieve anything. Well, today we've read the passage from Acts 17, and thanks, Jonathan, for this one, because there is a lot in it. And we're going to do our best to journey through a little bit. We're really considering the idea of idols and ideologies and how these things might pierce our hearts. And so before we heard this passage, we found Paul, who's been basically waiting for a mate. After jumping on a boat and sailing down the coast, he's now waiting for Silas and for Timothy in Athens. And this is a relatively safe place for him because back in the area of Thessalonica and Berea, which is sort of north of Athens, the Jews were not particularly happy with him. They didn't like what he had to say. And so he quickly got on a boat and sailed down to Athens. And so he's really trying to keep to himself here. He's trying to keep this low profile and just trying to chill out in Athens for a little bit. But it says that the Spirit provoked him as the city was full of idols. So he's trying to lay low, keep to himself, and yet he's called to action by the Holy Spirit. And I can sort of imagine this feeling. He's just left a town because of the hostile reaction to his preaching, and now he's in this new town, and he's like, really, God? You want me to speak into this now? Did you not see what just happened? I had to get on a boat and flee. Can I just lie low? Can I just sit under the radar for a little bit? And so I imagine he's sitting there with this feeling of just wanting to be able to sit and just chill for a moment. But what does Paul do? He hears this stirring of the Spirit, and he gets up on the Areopagus, which is this big rock. It's basically this natural stage, and you can go and see it now. I'd love to go there sometime. It's in Athens. And he stands up in front of the people, and he basically says to them, "You are ignorant." Can you imagine if I said that to you right now? What would your reaction be? Does your heart go hard or does it go soft? Do you become defensive or do you let it sit inside you? Well, I can imagine that he probably had a bit of a hard reaction from that. In fact, that's what we found out. He tells them that they are ignorant. This word in the Greek is agnoio. We can try and say that together if you like. Agnoio. I'm going to get you to do it on the count of three. All right, let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Agnoio. Very good. It means to not know. It almost sounds like that in agnoio, to not know, to be unaware, to be ignorant, to be unaware of something that might be right in front of you. This word agnoio. I currently drive out to Golden Grove every day. We live in Belair, and so it's quite a bit of a drive. I get to see most of the city traffic in the morning and the afternoon. And I'm not sure if you've been driving before and you've seen someone driving along with something like their boot open, and they're just unaware. I had this the other day. A gentleman, actually, it wasn't his boot, it was his tradie canopy was open, and he had all his whippersnippers and he had all of his lawnmowers all in there, and the whippersnippers were starting to fall out, and he's just driving along, actually on the way home, clearly had a big day mowing lawns. I'm like, buddy, check, and he's looked in the rear vision mirror and this big reaction, completely unaware that some of his prized tools were about to fall out. Very unaware. Maybe you've had this experience with someone driving and they've got a completely flat tyre, I don't know, I just can't imagine driving down the road with that tyre going boom, 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 boom. But you often see it. Completely unaware, agnoio. And so Paul is directing this sermon, it says in the passage, to the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. He wants to bring awareness to this epiphany that the Spirit has given him. And so there's a connection being made between the thought leaders of the community and the idol worship And the passage says, particularly, he's alarmed by the idol to the unknown God. And so I think it's interesting that both of these ways of thinking are prevalent today. And so we're going to have a quick look at some of these philosophies. I'm not sure if any of you have studied Epicurean or Stoic philosophy before, but I'm going to give you a quick rundown. But I'm going to give you a rundown with what Paul is saying to contrast these ways of thinking. So let's start with Epicurean thought. So God's involvement. Epicureans believe that gods existed but are indifferent and do not intervene in human affairs. Paul, however, here is proclaiming a personal, actively involved God who created the world and sustains it. He emphasizes that God is near to humanity and calls people to repentance. So the contrast here is a distant God with a close and relational God. And maybe as I go through these, you might just like to think, have I had these thoughts before? Have I had these sort of understandings of God or these beliefs, or have I seen them around me in our community? On the topic of creation and life's purpose, Epicureans saw that the world was material and random with no divine purpose, and aimed for personal tranquility as the highest good. Sounds good, doesn't it? Personal tranquility. But Paul taught that God created the world with purpose and that human life finds its meaning in seeking and knowing God. He mentions the afterlife at the end of his little sermon. The Epicureans rejected the idea of the afterlife, believing that the soul dissolves with the body at death. Whereas Paul asserts that there is a resurrection and a final judgment where God will judge the world through Jesus Christ. For Epicureans, the ethical life was about avoiding pain and pursuing personal pleasure, defined by simplicity and friendship. I'm going to say that one again because I wonder if this is something that you have thought about for yourself or maybe actively pursued. I'll say it again. For Epicureans, the ethical life was about avoiding pain and pursuing personal pleasure, defined by simplicity and friendship. That last part particularly, simplicity and friendship. Paul, though, emphasizes repentance, righteousness, and living in relationship with God. It all culminates in the future resurrection that he's pointing towards. And so while Epicurean philosophy focuses on achieving tranquility through the natural world and being sort of detached from God, Paul's message centers on having a relational connection with a true and one God, a moral life that's guided by transcendence, a personal God who invites us into humanity. There's quite a difference there. And so as we look at Acts 17, this is the nature of his sermon. He's coming up against these ideologies, this philosophy. To understand what's going on in Acts 17 a little bit, there is some prior knowledge that we need. And we need it from Exodus 32. And so you probably know this story. This is where God's people have come out of Egypt, okay? And now they're sort of in the wilderness, and Moses climbs up the mountain. It could be known as a volcano, Mount Sinai. And what does he receive up there? He gets the 10. Very good. Okay, so you know this story. But maybe I'm going to refresh you on what happens after he receives the 10. So enjoy listening to this. This is from Exodus 32, verse 15. Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, "There is a sound of war in camp." And Moses replied, "It's not the sound of victory, it's not the sound of defeat, it's the sound of singing that I hear." When Moses approached the camp and saw a calf, or a cow or a bull, whatever it might have been, and the dancing, his anger burned and threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them into pieces at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf and he made it, made the people burn it in the fire and then ground it into powder, scattered it in the water, and made the Israelites drink it. He said to Aaron, what did these people do to you, that you led them to such great sin? Do not be angry, my lord, Aaron answered. You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, make us gods who will go before us. As for this Moses fellow who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. He's gone up the mountain. So I told them, whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off. And then they gave me the gold and threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so become a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites rallied to him. So we've had this sort of epic story of receiving the inscribed 10. It says it was the writing of God. And Moses is coming back down and he sees that the people have created this idol, this calf out of the gold. The gold probably came from the spoils that they received from Egypt. And they've made this calf and they're dancing around. Their attention, their focus, their admiration is on this idol that they had created. A really important quote that I'm going to use to help us understand what's going on here. Thomas Cahill says, they made the mistake of worshipping God's creation rather than him as creator. So again, I'm going to say it a few times. They made the mistake of worshipping God's creation rather than him as creator. God's people wanted to maintain a level of control, to have a tangible object to create and then dedicate their awe and attention towards. And this leads us to the difficulty in this. It's not that there's anything wrong with gold or cows. God created them both. They are both his work. And he also gave us, and God's people in the story, the skills to create and to craft. He made us as creators as well. God the Creator created us as co-creators, and his creation is good, including us. But in verse 30 from our passage in Acts, Paul is pointing back to this moment. And he says, and he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he gives himself, everyone, life and breath and everything else. God gives us life not so that we would worship his creation, the life side of his creation, but that we would worship him as creator. In both these passages, Exodus and Acts, idolatry represents humanity's attempt to domesticate the divine, to make God more accessible and controllable. The golden bull in Exodus and the Athenian idols in Acts are expressions of this impulse, a way to reduce the infinite to something comprehensible. And yet, as we pursue the one true God, our challenge is to rise above the limitations of physical idols and grasp at the transcendent, the personal nature of God. A God who is not just a distant force, but intimately involved in history and our lives. And so by connecting these two stories, we see a continuity in the biblical narrative. Both Moses and Paul confront people entrenched in ideology, yet in very different cultural contexts. Both point towards a deeper understanding of God's nature, not as a deity bound by human expectations or physical representations, but as the living, active God who shapes history and demands a transformative response. Agnoio. It's the awareness that we might have of whether we are worshipping God's creation or worshipping him as creator. I want you to think about your favorite musical artist. if you've got a favorite band or a favorite solo singer, doesn't matter what era or generation, think about your favorite artist. And I wonder if you've been to a concert or you've heard people share about going to a concert. Has anyone here purchased the tickets that are not just the front row tickets, but they're sort of the diamond, gold, platinum package where you get to go backstage and you get to shake hands with the artist. You might get to have sort of pre-drinks in the green room with the artist and get a photo with them. You know, it's this experience that's not just sitting right at the front of their feet as they create, as they perform, but you actually get to go backstage and meet them and have a photo with them and spend time with them. It's interesting to me that this is what people will pay the most money for, extreme amounts of money for this chance. And I think that there's a bit of a connection here with this idea that we love to go and experience the creation, someone's art, through their music, but yet what is most interesting is the relationship that's behind that, the chance to actually go and meet the artist. From Acts, Paul says, "Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. God isn't something that we hold, manipulate, or control. Rather, we are his offspring. We are his creation. And further, we are a part of his family. We are his creation in the sense that we are his offspring." And so I think it's a real challenge that so often we can get caught up in being in awe of the music at the concert. We can be so in awe of God's creation or the things that we create or that others create. Yet what is most interesting and most wonderful to me is the chance to meet Jesus face to face, to be in that experience of relationship with him now and forevermore. Since we're God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. No matter how wonderful the creation is around us, whether it's our skill or whether it's God's direct creation. If you've been to New Zealand or somewhere like that, or you've been around some of the amazing parts of Australia, God's creation is phenomenal. When you look up at the stars, it is incredible. When you look around at movies and books, when you look around at people's gardens, people's clothes, there are amazing, amazing examples of creation. But what is it all there for? It's to point back to him. It's not so that we would focus on the creation, but that we would go, oh my goodness, look at our Creator. How much more wonderful is he? How much more amazing is he than what I can see in front of us? I don't know if you've been at work ever before and you sort of have had this feeling or this experience where you're only worth what your output is. You're only worth or seen for what you actually do, not who you are. And I think in thinking about bringing a message to you, I was like, I wonder if God ever has that experience when we just focus on what he does, on the things that are before us, right in front of us. I wonder if he has this experience of feeling like, do they even see me? I want them to know me. I want you to know me. I don't want you to focus on what's in front of me. I made it so that you would see me, not so that you would see my creation. And I think this is super tricky because it's awesome having nice things. It's what we should do. We should create wonderful pieces of art. We should make amazing things. And it's okay to pursue a nice necklace or a good car or a good home. There's nothing wrong with those things, but do they point towards Jesus for you? That is the challenge. Do they enable you to walk with him? Are they things that point you towards Jesus or God as your creator and Jesus as someone that you can have relationship? Our creations are wonderful and great, but it's because they point back to our creator, back to the opportunity of relationship. Because as we focus on Jesus, His creation gets better. We get better. The world around us gets better. When we focus on the idols in front of us, that's where it stops. But when we step into relationship with Jesus and focus on Him, His creation gets so much better. You get better. I get better. We all get better as we walk closer with Him. So now it's time for you to consider the ignoio. What are you unaware of in your life that might be a glaring idol? What are the things in your life that you pursue, that you desire, that you strive towards, that are not pointing in the direction of Jesus? When we pursue our Creator, His creation gets better. We get better. You can't have the cart before the horse here. We don't need to have success or becoming better as our focus. That thing that we want, that piece of God's creation or our creation. But when we focus on Jesus, we grow in His likeness. And we are eternally more successful. We are eternally more whole. This idea that in our community we can raise up individuals that are the best versions of themselves. If we think about our children and youth for a moment, is that the message we're giving them? Or is it a message that Jesus will transform them into the best versions possible? I know that there is this pressure for people, certainly my age, maybe some of your age, maybe some of your age, to be successful, to be the best. I feel like I've been told that my whole life, that I can be anything, that I can be the best. But the truth is that we can be completed, we can be made whole, we can be created the best when we focus on Jesus. That when we do it in our own strength, it just gets us to an idol. He calls us to rely on His strength. And He tells us that when we're successful, it's because He made us successful. We are made whole because He makes us whole. We are only good because He makes us good. We don't have to strive. We don't have to grind. We don't have to just keep going on. We don't have to achieve the next thing to earn His favor, because Jesus has stepped in and He has done the work. And we realize when we have this experience of ignoio, our eyes can be fixated on Jesus. We must focus on Him as Creator and not His creation. We don't have to try to be the best versions of ourselves because Jesus makes us the best. We are His good creation, and we get better when we focus on Him, when we walk alongside Him. Jesus completes us. As His good creation, we are back with our Creator. So I just wonder for you, is there something that comes out of this that's a challenge? Is there a part of God's creation that you're fixated on? What seems so good, so amazing, and yet it ends there for you? And how could that be transformed into something that fixates your eyes on Jesus? How do you look through the idols that might be around you and realize that the idea of everything around us is to be pointed towards Jesus? How can you turn it from an idol into something that brings you into deeper relationship with your Creator? How can you start to see it pointing towards Jesus? I'm going to leave you with a quote and then I'm going to pray. So if the band want to come up, you're welcome. This is from John Ortberg. It says, "The good news about that Jesus preached is now that it's possible for ordinary men and women to live in the presence and under the power of God. It is not about the minimal entrance requirements for getting into heaven. It's about the glorious redemption of human life, your life. This is what Jesus wants to do in your life. He wants to redeem you. He wants to morph you more like Him. And He wants the things around you to point to Him, for you to realize that." Let me pray. God, thank you for your wonderful and amazing creation. We thank you that we get to open our eyes each morning and see your created works. And we thank you that we're invited to be creators with you. May we not have our eyes fixated on your creation around us, on the odds that may be formed. May our eyes be eternally fixed to you. And may you disrupt our hearts. May you give us the chance to understand what might be getting in the way this morning. In your name, amen.